So we're going to go over a couple of topics tonight. One is kind of quick, is going to use the input box. And then after that, we're going to go over forecast and trending. So we can use that functionality. And after that, we'll have a quick, actually part of the the input box. We're going to see an example how we can do a filter, table filter by VBA putting the criteria in input box. So, and after that, we'll start the first part of PowerPivot. And that's actually what we need the laptop for mostly. But all the files I'm working on are under week 12. You can download them, put them in My Documents or special folder. For PowerPivot, don't put them in My Document. Create a folder on the C drive called temp and put them in, when I got a good marker. Create a folder. That works. I go on. Thank you. C/temp folder. Create a folder in the C drive. Put the folders in PowerPivot into this folder instead of My Documents. Okay. These laptops will be wiped out later, right?
Yeah.
So they get reset.
Yeah.
So we don't have to delete after we finish.
No, better just not save it on the desktop.
That's fine. Okay, just save it on the C drive, but if you need later to upload it to your own account, email it to yourself, yes, you can do that. Okay.
So all done?
I think we're good. If needed.
I'll keep one side open, so.
Okay, I'll take care of that. Thank you. So yeah, we should be done 8:45. Oh, you got one more. Okay. We'll start with the input box. So we saw the message box, which is a mean to display a specific message through in a message box. The input box are similar, but it's going to ask you to enter some data, then you can use it in your code to do something. Okay. Quick example of the message box, for example, create a function here, a macro, a message box to give you the number of sheets in this in the workbook. So in this one, the workbook, we have two numbers. Let's see. Create a new button. Yes. And we'll name it number of worksheets. So I assigned this to that function message box, and we'll just return the counts of the sheets. If I click it, it's a message box, give me 3. Third one is probably hidden. It is. So let's see the opposite. What if I want to use read a value and put it in A? So let's build that macro from here. Sub called read input. So let's declare a variable. Then we'll call it TMP for temporary, or like called input, str for string, or input string as string. Now I need to assign the value which is going to be read from the user. So I'll say input string equal input box, and we'll see what attributes or parameters. So you see the format of the function, you have prompt, and again, what does it mean when you have these attributes between square brackets? Optional. So you need to at least enter a message. Please enter something. And it returns what? String. You need to pay attention to this because later on, even if you expect or you need the input of a number, initial is going to go on a string. After that, you have to validate it or convert it to an integer or double. But all entries, no matter what the nature are, character numbers are read as string. Okay. So the prompt will be, please enter a value. any value. Now we have a value in input string. Now I can put it in range A1. Equal input string. So let me assign this macro to it. Read input. Okay. So when I click this, it's going to ask me this. Please enter a value. So value I'll put 1500. I hit OK, and it goes into A1. So let's run it again with the step-by-step so we can see how it's getting executed. I'll put a breakpoint here. So I either click next to this line on this gray area, or when I put the cursor on this line, I press F9. This is a break line, means when I execute, it's going to stop there. Then I can go step by step. So I click test input. It stopped here. So currently you see, if I put the mouse over input string, it shows me equals nothing. So there's no value currently assigned to this variable. Then I do step into or F8. Now this line got executed. So I put 1960, press OK. Now see what I got in input string is 1960. And I press F8, now the value got assigned into A1. So it's done. So before assigning the value, how can I check, for example, if the user input a value? What if I run it and I had just hit OK, entered nothing? I need to give a message, let's say invalid input, if the user enters nothing. So I need to check something here. If what? There's different ways you can check for blank value.
Input string equals to empty space.
You can either put, if it's equal to empty, double quotes, just like it was, like that. You can also check if length of a string is 0, right? So the other way you can check if the length is 0.
Can you use isEmpty?
There is another function called if is empty input string, then, so is empty returns what? Boolean. This means it returns true or false. So you don't have to put equal or anything. So there's different ways you can check for that. They're all equal. By the way, if you enter space, space is not empty. It's a character. So let's use, I prefer to use as empty. Hold on, let me leave those there so you guys can see. Check if input is empty using is empty function. Or okay. If it's empty, I want to return a message box with an error message. Message box invalid input. And after that, I want it to exit. I don't want it to continue the rest of the macro. To stop the execution of the macro, just like when we had in the for loop, to break the for loop, we had the exit for. Here you do the same thing, it's exit sub. This will stop the execution of the macro and will stop right here. It will not continue after the if statement. You can use exit sub. You want to stay closer? If it's, okay, I'll scroll up a little bit. So this is a way you check for your input. Use this logic. So let's try it. If I hit OK, oh, no. So let me see. Input of message string F8. Huh. Weird. They didn't consider it as empty.
Use the cells, not the input string.
True or false.
You use the range
Or
for
like
cells.
dot y.
Is empty.
No, it's empty. You have to pass the expression, which is in this case is input string, which is empty. But for whatever reason, didn't consider this. So this is why you should test it. Hold on.
It's a string, but is empty is checking whether the cell is empty or not.
Not this cell. Cell or string. But let's check. I think len should work, or the first one. So length equals 0. So it did show that length is equal 0. Then we can use that. Yes.
What we were doing wrong is you have to initialize is empty equals to false. Then it will start. True.
I'll double check that, but it shouldn't because you're providing that. We'll try it. So F5. So invalid input, and then nothing gets done. Is empty is a function. You should not initialize it.
You are not initializing it. You're giving it a condition that if is empty, this equals to this.
No.
Then you have to tell it that whether.
You should not, because hold on. It is Control Z. This basically the format of the if statement. If this condition true or false, then do that. So is empty will return true or false. If true, do this. Otherwise, do that. So you can say if this empty equal true, still okay. Excel's not going to complain, but this is unnecessary.
But then how does Excel know whether to go inside or not? You have to, because it's an if condition.
No, if condition, yes. If it's empty, what's the type of empty?
Exactly. So it will either return a true or a false, right?
No, I'll tell you a different example. So if you use in length, you have to say equal 0 or not, because this whole expression will return true or false. Is length equal 0 true, or is not equal 0, then it's false. So the whole expression will be returned true or false. Is this value equal 0? Yes, then it's true. If this value doesn't equal to 0, then it's false. If you're comparing two values, yes. The outcome of any comparison, basically this equal sign is to compare. Is this equals to that? There's two answers, either yes or no. So, but the is empty itself, that function is itself Boolean. So that function returns true or false. You don't need to compare it to anything else. Is empty is not a value. Okay. So we use length. If the length is 0, then do message box and input. Okay. So this is one. Now let's say we need this as a number. And we not enter just a value. Please enter a price. And we need to make sure that the price, dim price as what? What's the type of price? Money type. Double. Integer doesn't allow decimals. So how can I put input string, convert it to price? So price equals the function to convert string to double is val, or value. The input of val is what? String. The output is double. If this expression we're passing has only numbers, it will give you the equivalent number as double. But if it's not, it's going to return 0. So the function val converts from string to double, because when you enter it, the system recognizes it as a string, even though they are numbers. But it's to Excel, it's still text. It doesn't use it as numbers. The reverse function to convert anything to string, it's called CSTR, convert to string. We'll use it later, but if you want to just note it down. So let's test it with numbers and without numbers. So 550, 189 or 98. That's F8. You notice a difference when I put the mouse over input string and price? The value is between double quotes. When you put the mouse over a variable, it gives you the value in it at that point. If it's between double quotes, means it's being treated as a string. Meanwhile, go to price. You notice 550 of 198 without the double quotes. That means this is a number. Excel is treating this as a number. And then I assign it to A1. So let's try see what happens if we enter a letter. I put A. Okay. So string value input string has A. Price has 0. It couldn't convert A to a number. So return 0. So this is a process how we can read an input. We can check if it's empty or not. And then if you need to convert it to a number, this is how you do that. Okay. Show you another example how we can perform addition. Hold on. Let's rename this called read. We create another button. Addition. So before we execute it, let's read the code and you guys can tell me what happens. So we have 3 variables, x, y, z as double, and I have user input as string. So I have user input equal input the first number. X equal val of user input. Then I do go again, user input equal input, enter second number. Then y equals val user input. Z equal x plus y, message box, the total is z. Do you follow the sequence of this code? So we read the value of x initially. We need the first value, we put into x. We read the second number, put into y. We add them up, put the addition to z, and then we display the total of the two numbers. So the first number, 7, 34, total is 101. You can use negative numbers, negative 45, plus 28, total is 53. So this is how you can use the input box. Okay. Any question on this? So to summarize, input box will read any user input as a string, as a text. If you need it as a number, you use the val function to store it in a variable of type double or integer. Then you can use it for anything. You want to pass it to another function, assign it to a cell, but then you put it into a variable. Okay. Any question? Yes, sir. Real life, we'll show you an example, for example. It's the example we're going to see, we have the list of data, and you want to do filter by, then every time you just click a button, filter by this column, start with a letter, just type in a letter and hit OK. So you don't have to save few clicks. So an operation that takes, for example, 3 or 4 clicks every time to do it, and this is just one thing that varies, changes from every time another, then just do that. Okay. Also, I've seen applications where one guy create like a book inventory, just library inventory, and like search for this, and they prefer to use input box. It's not like only way, but just an option. Instead of like crowding in a specific cell, okay, search for this and hit enter, but it's a tool. Okay. So let's see how we can use this to filter. This is our art collection. We're gonna use this to filter by artist name, with the artist start with a certain letter. So typically we go to artist, text filter, begins with D, and hit OK. So this is too many clicks if you do that a lot for any type of data. So we created a function just to filter that. Enter the first letter, be D, count is 3. I didn't fill this, just give you the count. I need to change that, but we'll do the filter. Edit text. Count by artist name. So let's see the macro behind it. See, it's just a simple one. So the purpose of this macro is basically to give you just the count of how many articles assigned to an artist whose name starts with a specific letter. So if we sort, for example, as we mentioned, text filter begins with, let's say, S. You do that, how many do we have? 8, right? 8 out of 14. But instead of doing that, type in S, tells you it's 8. So this is using input and for loop. And I have this table here just to verify. Okay. So let's see how this macro works. So we had a variable called counter. Initially is 0. And we read what's the letter we're looking for. Artist starting with the artist name start with what letter? So that goes into first letter. And we check just like we did if the valid input or not. If the length of the input is less than 1 or equal to 0, then give you error message. Invalid input, try again, and you exit. That's it, we're done here. If it's not, then you check if the length of the first letter is greater than 1, because you only need 1 letter. Then you also you don't give an error message, but you take the first letter from the word you typed. So these 2 steps basically just to make sure that we only pass on just 1 letter. So if you enter nothing, get an error message. If you enter more than 1 letter, just the first one will be considered. So this is where it says left of the first letter equal and 1. So if you enter more than 1 character, we're only going to take the leftmost letter. Okay. After these steps, now the use case, the function that eludes a couple of you in the midterm, I capitalize the input. So if you enter lowercase, it's going to be converted to uppercase. At this point, if my code cut to here, then I'm sure I have first letter has a value of 1 character and it's capital letter. Now I do a for loop. So remember when I told you you can use while if you don't know how long your data is, or you can use for if you know. So this is another way. If your range is actually in a data table, I name it here table inventory, then actually you can access the length of that table. So I can use the range, the table as a range name. Because it's a very well-defined range, Excel knows how many rows it has. So I can access through rows.count. That gives me how many rows it has. And I do +1, so because it counts, the table inventory includes the header. I go from 2 to, I'm sorry, it's the count +1, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I equals to 2 is when you're skipping the first header.
Because I'm skipping the header and, okay, put it this way.
Why do you take plus?
I'll tell you why. So this has 115 items, right? But it starts from 2. So 2, and so I'm skipping the header. So I should not end, so the count gives me 115, but I want to end at 116, at row 116. That's where the +1 comes from. It's 2 to the count +1. If you start at 3, then it's count +2. +1 to account for the header.
What does the table inventory refer to?
This range here. Remember when you format a dataset as a table? When you format it as a table, it's create an object called table. And here you can name it, and that's already a defined range. Actually, you can check in formulas under names. You see table inventory. It already has this data. It's from A2 to J116. So Excel knows where that range is. It's a named range. So the range function can use regular range from A1 to D5, or it can use a named range. And therefore, it knows how many rows it has. So this property gives me how many rows in that range. So in this case, if my data changes, as long as within that range, my code is good. I don't have to come back to the code and change the for loop. So for every value, what I do, I get the artist name. Which column is the artist name? It's in column B, correct? So for every one, I read the artist name. I put in a variable called artist name. So it's range bni.value. Then I check if the left character of the artist name, if the uppercase of the left character of the artist name equal first letter, then I increase the counter by 1. That I found a match. And then it goes to the next one. At the end, it shows me the count of the artist with first letter is counter. So it goes through every row. It checks for the artist name for the first letter. If it's a match, it increases the counter by 1. Otherwise, it will skip to the next one. So this is a way you can use this function. Let's verify it again. Pick another. Let's do M. Hello. Hit cancel. Let me put a breakpoint and we'll do a debug walkthrough one by one. So first letter equal input. I put M lowercase and I hit OK. So first letter is what? Lowercase m. Is the length less than 1? Length equal 1. So this condition is not true. It's going to skip it. Is the length greater than 1? No. It's going to skip it. Then after that, what's going to happen? First letter equal lowercase m. After the U case is going to be capital M. Now I go through the for loop. How many counts we have? 115. Starting at row 1. So I'll go from 2 to 115 plus 1 to 116. So the first value, his name is Morgan. So I equal to B2 is Morgan. I'll highlight this function and then I put the mouse over. I can do add watch if you want to follow the value. Tells you what is this function translates to. Is it equal? Yes. Then the counter was 0. Now the counter is 1. Moves on. The next one. Artist name. Let me drag this here. Artist name is Novari. Is it equal? No. It skips it. Third one. Chico. No. Roman. No. Tigrigo. No. The next match is, so far we're row 13 and it's still counter equal 1. So the first 13 row there's only one match. Now McGraw also, this is a match, should increase by 2. Now the counter equal 2. We're at row 15. I'll hit F5 to continue. It did found 19 matches through the whole list. Again, maybe you don't see the benefit of this automation because it's a short list, but consider you're doing the same on a data set of like 100,000. Okay. Any question on this? Let me check this one. I got it. Okay. Now we're going to see how we can use the input box to filter by value. Actually, let's build it together from scratch. Okay. First, remember when I showed you how you can do to record a macro to get a functionality? Let's see what would be how would the code would look like if we just filter by begins with. So I started recording a macro. I click artist, text filter, begin with letter M. Hit OK, and I stop recording. So let's see what we got. I think we got it under module 5. So this is the object, basically the range of table inventory. There's a function called, or a method called autofilter. Has attributes. Field equal to means what? Means the second column. This is which column we're filtering. And what is the criteria? Equals what? M star means starts with M. Yes.
It has criteria 1, so can we give multiple criteria?
Yes, I'll tell you why we give multiple criteria. When you do begins with, this is the second criteria. if you're using it. It's optional. So you can use and or, right? This criteria or this criteria, or if you want to do this criteria, and you may want to say, for example, starts with M and ends with D, if that's a criteria. But the second criteria is optional. And to specify and or, this is where the operator comes into place. Operator is XL AND. This is for the AND radio button. But if you don't specify a second criteria, this is useless. You don't have to pay attention to it. But the most important part is you need to specify which field you're filtering by and what is the criteria. And the begin with, end with, contains, has to do with the wildcard character. So if I'm writing this code, if I want to say ends with M, what should I change here? Star M. Or contains M. Star M star. Or does not end with M. That in Python and C and Java. If you're not sure, actually test it. Here, record macro, macro 3, artist begins with or does not begin with M, and stop recording. Let's see what we got. Here, different than M star. So this is the way you do different. So you have equals, less than equal. If you're using numbers, you can use less than equal. And different, this is the one how you do it. What if you want to say does not end with M? Different than star M. So this is how you do it. So if we take this and let's work around it. Instead of now M is hard-coded, right? Let's make this a variable and have get it from a user input. Starts with M. Let's fix it. Go back, put it back first. M star. So let's define them first letter as string. First letter equal input. Enter artist's name. To filter by. Hold on. What is it complaining about? List? Input box. Oh. I don't want to use C#. Once I converted from VB.NET to C#, this became harder for me. Okay, and so after that, now before I do put any check, let's assume I enter the correct value. Where should I put this? Actually, if this criteria is equal, you don't have to put this here. You need to put it mainly if it's different or less or equal. But if it's equal, you don't put it. But let's say we'll leave it here. So I need to replace M. I need to replace M with first letter. What do? I need to concatenate this. So what I have, so this is how you break a text, and So I have equal m star, right? So I need to take this out and put a variable in between. So what I do before that, I put double quote to keep this as text. I put the ampersand, put my variable, and then ampersand double quote. So let's see how we do it. Let me give another example. So this is a test, right? If I want to put first letter to show in the text here, actually, hold on a sec. I have it in another function, the one we just saw. Not this one. Here. Once we found the count, so the whole message displayed, right? The count of artist names starting with A is 8, correct? So that whole message is concatenation of 4 pieces. One static piece between double quotes. So no matter what the letter is, this part of the message always will be displayed, right? The count of an artist name starting with what? I close the double quotes, so this is the static part of my text. I attach to it what? The variable first letter. So whatever value in first letter, it will appear after with. Start with A, with B, whatever we entered, correct? Then use ampersand, and between double quotes means what?
Static.
And notice the space before and after. So it looks right. And then after that, I put the count. So if we have this like that, so make sure before and after the variable, the text file, if there's any text before, close with double quote, ampersand, put your variable, and open if there is an attachment after that. If it's at the end, that's it, ends with it. So here, m is static. I need to replace it with my variable. So, and first letter, and what comes after? So first letter replaces what? Replaces m, correct? So this is my new criteria. Is it clear? Kind of, probably. Means if I enter, let's say, filter by m, it will be m star, means begins with, not only equals to. So it begins with whatever letter I provide and whatever is after it.
What happens if we insert star without the and, like after first letter?
What do you mean star?
Without the quote. Yeah,
So
quotes and and.
criteria, the value of criteria is a text. So whatever you provide to criteria has to be a text. So this is the criteria. Criteria 1. Let's compare this. Hold on. Let me do home and let me do side by side, compare it to M. And let me delete this just so you guys can compare. So you notice, so this is, if first letter is M, it will translate to this. You see how it works? So equals is the equal sign as a text, and whatever letter and star. So first letter is M, it will translate to this. Looks easier than it is. I'm kidding, actually it's the opposite. It looks harder than it is actually. It's concatenation of static text and a variable. So the criteria has to be in certain format, either different than your condition.
It would be hard during an incident.
In the exam, yes. If you don't practice, definitely will be harder. If the exam you're doing it for the first time, yes, it's definitely going to be hard. So let's test this one. If you want to make it like 2 steps simpler, you can, hold on. You can define another criteria as string. Let's put criteria equals and first letter and star. And here we say criteria 1 equal grade. So you can do it this way. So this is your criteria. If your criteria has to be, actually this could be also a conditional statement. This also could be a variable, could be equal, different, greater, it depends on other conditions if you want to control that too. But at this point, this is basically filter by it begins with first letter. Okay. So this begins with first letter. So let's see how this will work. We can run the macro. F5 it's already on. No, it's okay. So it did filter that out. In the exam or the homework, I'm not going to ask you to come up with this. I'll probably provide the whole structure just and highlight what you need to change, criteria or other. So you don't have to spend time figure out what's the right function. Yes.
Here, we have already defined the table name as table inventory, and that's why it's taking as list objects.
Correct.
But if we do not make a table name, or we do not,
you need to specify the range. So this will be then range A2 to J118. You can do that.
Can it have a range function inside the list object?
Range function, I'm not sure, you can try it. But the way I'm showing it, this is how I would always recommend it. If you want to automate a function, record the macro, and then take that, understand how it works, and modify it. Okay. So this is how you can use the macro. Let's create another button for that. I hate the small screen. This will be, which one? Too many functions in these files. What do we call it? We called it filter by artist name. Filter by artist name. So when I click on it now, do like D, that's filter automatic. So this will save you go filter, text filter, begin with, so on. If you enter nothing, it will basically filter by everything. Or basically, it's going to remove the filter. Okay. There is additional functions there actually to filter by artist, gender, and so on. So I'm not going to go over that, but pretty much the same principle. Just the number of column, the field number is different. Instead of 2 or 3 will be, instead of 2 will be 3, and so on. Okay. Wow. Took more time than I thought on this one. Yes.
How can you find out the name of the table without recording the macro? Like, is there a way to check?
Yes. So the name of the table, let me go back there. Which one was that? Table with macros. Yes. So if your data is already formatted as a table, once you click on the table, you see a new tab open here, design. So see, if I click outside, that design disappears. So when you click on design, you get a table name on the most left here. By default, when you create a table, it goes table 1, table 2, table 3, but you can rename it to something like more meaningful. And I personally, being background as a programmer, like to put like a prefix for different objects. So table starts with TBL. So I know that name, when I see that name in my code, I know that's a table. So if I just call it inventory, I don't know, it could be anything. Maybe I name a couple of things inventory, but I know that's a table inventory. Okay. Same thing with your variable. If your variable, you need also an indication that's a text, that's a number, you can put some prefixes as well. And for those few who do programming, basically, buttons names always start with btn, button name. Text box starts with text something label. So different controls is kind of more of a convention. These different controls, when they have different IDs, different names, when you name them, it's good to put a reference. What type of control is it? Is it a button? Is it a text box? Is it drop down, and so on? So same principle applies here. If it's a table, just start with TBL or just T. Something for you to know to distinguish between the different types. Okay. For those of you using Python as well, that's a good practice. Is any of you taking R language? Just 1, 2? How's it going with R?
It's got a learning curve.
It is. Good luck with that. So we'll move on to forecast and damn it, I really want, you know what? I'll do this in 5 minutes. It's pretty straightforward. Forecast, basically, if you have a set of data and you want to predict based on historic data, what would be the output of future? So we have X and Y's. Take this sample. You have period and sales. Let me see the other one. Take this one quickly. So we have different records of sales. If the price, put the price 25,000, this how much was sold. 27,000, this how much was sold. So we collected this data. So based on this data, you want to predict. So if I raise my price to 60,000, how much I would expect to sell based on historic data. So these are actual data. Based on this sample of data, could be small, could be large, and that also defines how accurate would that be. How much would that sell? So the function for that is forecast. So if you notice here at the bottom, hold on. Notice how many variations of forecast we have? And the one with the kind of a warning, that means this is going to be deprecated soon. This is the old forecast function, and it's still there for backward compatibility, but it's not recommended to use. So because there's different use for forecast, so all these new ones kind of a variation of this, because now they need a little bit more details of forecast. You have forecast ATS, linear, and so on. So the old one translates to linear, and then the other variation. So I'm not going to ask you to use any of the ETS forecasts. Forecast ETS, let's see, hold on. Return the forecasted value for a specific future target date using exponential smoothing method. So we'll just do the linear, because that actually will use that in finance and in investment a lot. Based on tons of historic data, you try to predict the performance of a specific stock or a pool of stocks.
Isn't it using regression behind it?
The smoothing, I'm not sure what it does. I'm not a statistician, so you probably need that, yes. So you still can use the forecast function alone. It's not going to give any errors, but we'll use linear too. So you need to forecast for a future value or a value of X that you don't have in your original data set. You need to specify what are the known Y's and the known X's. Based on the Y and X's, I have what would be the Y for that X. That's basically what forecast tells you. And you do that linear is pretty much the exact same thing. So what would be the output of 60,000 knowing that the Y's are C2 to C16 corresponding with these X's, would that be?
What were you trying to find?
So my data shows for every sale price, I'm selling specific number of items. So without going through actual market testing, based on this data I collected, I said if I raise my price to 60,000, how much do I expect to sell based on these market values? Okay. The trend value is pretty much the same. The difference is that the trend function, I'm not going to go over it, just to let you know, can give you more array of values, not only one. Also, one more thing I want to show you. Actually, I want to remove the trend line. Okay. So this is the data set. This is the X's and Y's. The price is X and the price is Y. So, you know, sometimes just based on a scatter plot or line, you say this is trending downward, this is trending upward. So every chart has something called a trend line. By default, it's linear. You can do exponential, linear, logarithmic, depends on your data. So this is my trend line. So it's trending downward. What defined how steep this is going? The slope. So one of the options of the trend line, when you format it, you can display equation on chart. So the slope is negative 1.4, negative 1.49, 1.5. And the intercept is 114. But let's say you want to get this data without going through the chart. The function for that, I'm not going to go through this now. Put it here. So there's a function called slope. Same thing. To provide a slope, you need the Y's and X's. So the Y's are these, and these are the X's. Negative 1.49. That's exactly what we see on the chart. So you can get this value without charting the data. Same thing for the intercept. You guys know what slope and intercept, right? Otherwise, I'll have to send you back to high school. So these are the values you see on the chart. And pretty much this is actually what the forecast function uses. So if you want to use the y for equals mx plus b, hold on, equal m, which is this, times x plus b, 25,000, that's it. This is the value you get the forecast. So this is what the forecast does. It creates the slope and intercept, and it plugs in the x for that and gives you that y. Let's round this up. So you notice it's the same value. So the linear one, this is what it does. Same thing when you see the forecast exponential or logarithmic, also align with the trend line if you want an exponential or logarithmic, so on. So if you put a logarithmic, you notice the function? Minus 58,600. What's ln? Natural log of x. What's that? This is not intercept. This is not a logarithmic function. Or exponential. Times e to the power. Gosh, what's this? Let me just improve the size a little bit. -3 to the power times 10 to the power -5 times x. Do you know what's e? E stands for? It's a constant. What's the name of this constant? Come on, guys. No? Euler's constant. What's the value of Euler's constant?
Oh, that's on the
Close enough. 2.71. Really, guys, forget high school math, did you? Okay. So this is supposed to stay with you for life. Okay. So these are, so this same thing with forecast and trend. Trend, you can play with it on your own free time, but I'm not going to ask for it in homework or final. Okay. So forecast is what you're responsible for. Now, pivot table, power pivot. On Blackboard, you have a folder called Power Pivot, the bottom, with 3 files. I want you to download the first 2. Put them in C/temp folder. Right-click, save link as. Never open a file immediately. Hold on, let me see if I should ask you to. Yes, inventory and sales, both files.
There's already a temp file.
Yeah, you can use it. So auto inventory, this is Access database file, and the second one is a text file. So we'll start at blank Excel folder, Power Pivot Auto Sales. So in Excel, if you don't see Power Pivot menu up here, you may need to add it. Do you all see it there? If you don't, you have to go to File, Options, Add-ins. At the bottom, you open the drop-down, goes to COM Add-ins. Click Go, and then you have to check Power Pivot for Excel. So we'll go step by step, very quickly. So Power Pivot actually is good when you can read data from external sources without having to copy or import those data. And you can link them, create combined pivot tables, use that data. And as the data changes in the source, you can refresh, so your Excel file will reflect those changes. Okay. So in Power Pivot, you click Manage, and a new window will open. Okay. Now under this section, Get External Data, if you notice you have many options. The standard default ones you can get from SQL Server, which is a database server from Access. or from OData, that's online data. But typically, this is the long list you can get from Microsoft SQL Server, SQL on Azure, that's cloud-based SQL Server, Access from Oracle, from Teradata, Sybase, Informex, IBM DB2, from reports, Excel file, text files. So we want to go to text file first. So again, go click from other sources, go down all the way to text file. And we click next. Now I need to browse for that file. It's ctemp. My computer is slightly different. Temp PowerPivot. But on your computer is going to be temp, and I'm going to select auto inventory. And I hit open. And this file is a tab delimited, so under column separator, by default it's comma. So change that to a tab. Then you see all the columns. It's going to give you a preview of the data. And you check this checkbox, use first row as column header. Similar to the import wizard, you need to specify what is the separator and if you have a header row or not. And from there you can, and here you can connection name, text source or inventory, you can leave it, and you click finish. So we have 2,300 records. So this gives you preview of the data. Now we need to add another source from the Access database. You can open from other sources or from a database from Access. Same thing, you need to browse for the file, which is the same folder. It's called auto inventory. Hit open. There is no username and password, so you can, initially if you want, you can test connection. It means it's good. Then you hit next. Select from list of tables. So Microsoft Access, as some of you know, it's a database system, so it can have multiple tables, just like spreadsheet can have multiple sheets. This one only has one. So we'll select specific table called auto sales, and we hit finish. If you trust the source, yes, I trust the source. Close. So now I have two tables, auto inventory, auto sales. So this data from two different sources. One is the inventory and one is the sales. So I need to make a connection. So I go to diagram view. So from the sales, how do I know which car was sold from the inventory list? There should be some ID there. A link. If I look at the data, go back to data view. So for every inventory, I have the model number, display, cylinder, transmission, drive, all this parameter of this car in inventory, and I have a vehicle ID here, VID. So when a car is sold, I have a sale ID, I have a vehicle ID, salesman, car type, blah, blah, blah. My reference to the inventory is the vehicle ID. This is what tells me if a car is sold or not from my inventory. So if I go to diagram, so my assumption here for my data to be reliable and consistent, that every car sold must have a record in your inventory. You cannot sell a car that's not in your inventory. So you can link both of them. You drag one to another.
Does it matter which way you drag it?
No.
And also, does your data have to be clean to use this?
Yes. Because if you end up with any record here, vehicle ID, that doesn't exist here, you're going to get an error that your data is not consistent. You have a record here that doesn't have a reference. And you notice this is 1 and star. Ideally, because this is the reference, this is the primary key, this is the foreign key. Every one here could have multiple IDs there. Think about it also if you have if I sell cell phones, right? I have inventory of cell phones, and my ID is the model number. I could have 10 of them. So I'll have one item in my inventory called cell phone and a quantity 10, but I could have 10 sales receipts related to that. I sell it to 10 different people. So this way the one too many can come from. Okay, actually should be the opposite way. Actually, Jenna, to your question, yes, it matters which way. So you go from the secondary table to the primary table. The primary is your inventory. So you go from sales to inventory. What I'm saying here, this ID comes from here.
How do you delete the old connection?
You click on it and press delete. So now Excel automatically can associate these two tables together, can link them based on the vehicle ID. Okay. Now I can close it. Yes.
My arrow does not show the 1 to 50.
If you drag from the sales to inventory, you need to select the. Sweet. We're almost done. I'll look at it once we're done. So under PowerPivot, hold on, home. So under pivot table, I click under insert pivot table. Typically, we select the data range for our pivot table, right? Now we can select use this workbook's data model. We have a data model in this workbook. So you click OK, and this gives you these two tables. So you can create pivot tables based on these two data sets. So for example, I can put model and sale amount, where the model number is from the inventory and the sale amount is from sales. You notice this saves me a lot. I don't have to take this data and combine it and massage it, and so it's one table to create a pivot table out of it. So those stay the way where they are, and I get this here. Okay. Sure. So pivot table, you go under insert pivot table, just like you do. So the data source, you have three options: either select a table or range from the same sheet which we did before. You can use external data source. We'll look at that later, or use this book's data model. So
I don't get an option. I don't have that option.
so try the choose connection.
No, there's no tab for the whole thing.
There's no
An
use this
external data.
worksheet's data model.
There's only select data.
Sure, show me.
So now I
Use external data source.
It's easier if you just click pivot table in the power pivot.
You can do that too.
Yeah.
So go to PowerPivot again, click manage. So we have this direct view. I'll look and see. Let's go again. The table.
It's still there. It's in manage.
Okay, that table is workable. So you can do that.
The other way to do it, if you don't see it, when you insert pivot table, you can use external connection. Click external connection and go to the tables tab, and you select this one, tables in workbook data model. Same thing. So again, under choose connection, you can use either table separately, or if you want them combined, click tables and use tables in workbook data model. You click open and you hit OK. So same thing.
We can just do Power Pivot from the manage.
You can do Power Pivot from here too.
Pivot table.
You can here pivot table, and you can create pivot table directly, and that will do in worksheets. Yeah. Try to do it the hard way first. So this is how you can connect to data sources external to the Excel sheet, and you can use the Excel sheet just as a dashboard to look at the data, manipulate it, and every time this data source changes, you go back to pivot table and manage, you click refresh. You can refresh specific one, the one you have it open, or the sales or inventory, or just refresh all. So next time we're gonna look at how we're gonna create calculated columns here. Add data, add columns that's not part of your original data, but then you can use it in your pivot table or you can consume it. Like calculated fields, you can add averages, totals, and so on. Okay. Yes, that's it for